Good evening, everyone. We would like to observe a moment of silence for those who have been attacked and have been part of the violence that is taking place in Israel. So if we could have a moment of silence at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to the October 9th, 2023 Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting of the Lower Merion Board of School Directors. This meeting is being live streamed and video recorded with sound for public broadcast. All participants joining via the webinar will need to use the chat feature, which will be enabled during audience recognition. If you are attending this meeting in person, you should be aware that other attendees may be recording the meeting as permitted by the Sunshine Act, and that this means, however, that any remarks you make, even those made at your seat, may be recorded by others during the meeting. The board believes it's in its best interest and the best interest of the students of the district to hear comments from district residents. An opportunity will be given later in the meeting for public comment, both in person and through the chat feature, which will be read by Ms. Buckman. The board strives to be respectful to all individuals making public comment and does not wish to limit any taxpayer or resident's right to free expression while making their public comment during the public comment period. Therefore, we also ask that everyone in the audience refrain from shouting and other disruptive comments while others are speaking. So we will start our meeting. We have one particular thing on our agenda this evening, and that is the mental wellness support programming supporting our students.
Good evening, everyone. This evening, our Director of Student Services, Ms. Kimberly Frazier, and I will be speaking about mental wellness and the supports that we have in place for our students. I want to start the presentation, or actually before the presentation, with a caveat that as we talk about what we have in place, we're always looking for ways to improve what we have in place. So we know that with each year, we have to continue to be nimble and agile and to provide supports that are dynamic so that we meet the needs, the ever-changing needs of our students. And so we'll go through the slides and then we'll be happy to entertain questions at the end.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Kimberly Frazier, Director of Student Services and Special Education. And I'm always pleased to be speaking on the topic of wellness. I think several years later, we still talk about the impact of COVID. And what I appreciate, one of the things out of COVID is that through this course of time, I think there's been a greater emphasis by the community at large about wellness and the importance of self-care and wellness, and being really mindful that mental health is not just the absence of mental illness. Mental health is really encompasses so much more. It's social, emotional, behavioral health, and the ability to cope with life's changes. And tonight, what we want to be able to do is share with you a little bit about the student services team members, what their roles are, build a foundation of what is underlining our work, highlight examples of some of the student supports that are in place, talk a little bit about the training and support of staff. We know that the individuals who are in front of our children every day matter a great deal, and so how do we support them and train them to be prepared to support students and families? And then we'll refresh a little bit about crisis management and response, which is also an important part of the work of the student services team. So you see here, this is both our district level administrative team and the roles that we fill, as well as our school-based student services team members. So you can see administratively what our team members oversee in terms of our clinical services, which are our school social workers and our school psychologists, our health services, and our counseling department, which includes our school counselors and our wellness counselors. Not listed here, but I would be remiss if I didn't also mention the importance of our special education administrative team and our school-based special education team members. They play a critical role in supporting students related to wellness, social, emotional health, and behavioral health. And so important to also reference those team members. You see here our building-based team members. Our school social workers are incredible resources for families. What our social workers are able to do is really connect families with resources both in school and out of school. They're very aware of what's available within the community and can help families. You know, systems can be very challenging to navigate. Even if you work in a system, if you're in education or mental health or the hospital systems, when you go through it as a parent, I think sometimes people feel like you don't know anything, like it's hard when you're a parent navigating systems. And so our social workers are really skilled at being able to help families navigate challenging circumstances and really being able to connect with those outside supports. Our social workers serve as critical team members when we look at our risk and our threat assessments. They serve on our achievement teams. They also help to support with social emotional work, meet with students in schools, and they monitor student attendance. Attendance can be an indicator of needs with it that we need to address. Our social workers really focus on truancy, prevention, and elimination. They take a lead role when we need to develop students' attendance improvement plans, so they support in that manner. Our school psychologists, we are very fortunate that we have a full-time doctoral level school psychologist in each of our schools and additional staff here at district office. The wealth of experience and the breadth of experience among that team is truly remarkable. The clinical team, social workers and psychologists meet monthly so they can share expertise under Dr. Naray's leadership. And they bring to the table so much more. I think sometimes we think of our school psychologists and they're a lead in those multidisciplinary evaluations. They really are experts at student learning and identifying student strengths and needs and whether there's a presence of a disability and being able to support teams with that. But they bring so much more. They really serve a lead when we are dealing with crisis response, the risk and the threat assessment. They serve as members of our achievement teams. And really, that expertise in wellness, mental health is a great value to the district. Our school counselors, we have counselors in all of our schools that also serve a really critical role. They get to know our students and families very well, quite involved with our students. And so they provide different layers of support. Sometimes we think right away about like the academic counseling part of that and helping students think about what courses they might be interested in. But beyond just course selection, it's also about how do you navigate an educational system and helping students with how do you access your academics, and if you need supports, how do you go about getting those supports and helping students learn how to navigate that. They also support with personal and social, doing small groups. They might focus on stress management, conflict resolution, crisis intervention, substance abuse counseling, and grief counseling. So they support with that in the schools. And then, of course, our career and college counseling. We focus on career and college counseling starting K to 12. We do it all throughout, developmentally appropriate at each level. And so counselors take a lead role in that. They also serve on our risk and threat assessment teams and our achievement teams in each school. Our wellness counselors are contracted counselors. They're all master's level counselors that we contract with an agency for, and they provide additional general education interventions. They may work with small groups of students. They may do whole school announcements and provide information to the student body. They might work on executive functioning skills with a student or a small group of students. They might work on social interventions based on what students need. So they've been a valuable asset to our schools as well. And our school nurses are a critical part of student services. We think about school nurses in terms of the assessment and treatment of illnesses and medication management and immunizations. but they really are such an important member of our team. And we're going to talk as we move along about the importance of relationships and wanting our students to be connected. And there are a lot of students who would identify the school nurse as the person that they feel most comfortable going to. They also receive the training and can serve on our risk and threat assessment teams and help support on our achievement teams as well. Yeah.
So some of you have heard me say that we are on this journey to full belonging. A sense of belonging is so important for all of our students and staff. And as we continue on this journey towards true belonging, we realize that the relationships that kids make with adults in their lives, particularly those adults in school, help make them more successful in school. We want every single student to feel that they truly belong at school. And we know, research has shown us time and again, that if a student has a deep connection with at least one adult at school, the likelihood of their success is exponentially greater than if they don't. So as your new superintendent, as I'm evaluating all of the systems in our district, one of the things that I'm looking at is how are we building relationships, repairing relationships, making sure that relationships are really sound moving forward, because that is going to create the strong foundation for everything to grow from.
And I think what you'll hear throughout, I reference, I'm here humbly representing like the amazing student services team, but it is about far more than just student services. It's not just our department, it's the collaboration across all departments, collaboration across all staff members. And so you'll hear throughout that importance of the role that all of our team members play in supporting our students and families. Our foundation is based on what Dr. Yanni said, relationship building, that social emotional learning, and that importance of finding those safe connections. There's a really great book that I'm sure most people have heard of, The Body Keeps Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. And one of the quotes from there that I find so powerful is, safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. And so that, again, that importance of connection and belonging. We value evidence-based practices and systems so that we're sure that the supports that we're putting in place are effective and will yield the results that we want. Again, this isn't just about the student services team member. This is about all of our staff that are supporting students every day. So we on our team have to be mindful of what training are we providing and what support are we providing to all of our staff. And that is our bus drivers, our cafeteria and our recess staff, our secretaries as they're greeting families and children every day, our teachers who are in the classroom. All of our team members play a really critical role. And so it's about being mindful about how we support staff to be able to support students and families. Engagement of families is critically important. You've heard us talk from a wellness perspective about like the district cannot do this alone. We can't do it in isolation. We need a community commitment to our children and doing this work collectively together with families, in close partnerships with families and in close partnership with our community partners. And then consistency and integrated efforts. Again, it's interdepartmental. It's about reaching and using our different departments. Everyone is in this work together. And it is about consistency in our process. It's consistency in our training. So all of our team members feel equipped to support students in their respective roles. You hear our colleagues from the Curriculum and Instruction Department speak publicly about the multi-tiered systems of support, and I think it's an important tie-in here as well. There are tiered systems of support within social and emotional learning. And when you think just real briefly, tier 1 is really like your universal tier. It's where the supports are for all students. And then as you move up in those tiers, it's an increase in intensity of support. Tier 2, maybe a smaller group of students who need maybe a temporary intervention or some additional support, and then can move on with that skill and apply it. And then Tier 3 is our most intensive. This is really truly individualized students and supports. A lot of times this is services through special education where students might require direct instruction or more comprehensive supports. This includes, we talk about this from academic, but the same is true for social emotional learning as well.
And if I could just say, when we talk about MTSS, it's a really fancy way of just saying we're giving kids increasing interventions to make sure that their needs are met. You can't intervene your way out of a Tier 1 problem, right? So if you don't have good instruction at Tier 1, it becomes really difficult to intervene your way out of that because kids need good Tier 1 instruction. They also need really good Tier 1 social emotional learning. And this is an area that districts historically have really struggled with because so much time is spent on the MTSS side or the academic side. So now what we're really doing is taking some time this year to really look at what we're offering at each of these tiers. And as we go throughout the year and we hear from students, we'll be able to refine our practices around MTSS for social emotional learning and mental health.
So we just also wanted to share a little bit, a sampling of student supports, and I just give caution that this is not meant to be all-inclusive. It really is just to give an idea of what some of the supports and services are that connect to this idea of wellness. And we wanted to highlight some of those. You'll see as we go through these different student supports fall across the different tiers as we're talking through these. So responsive classroom, that's in our elementary schools. It is based on the CASEL framework. CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, and really is evidence-based strategies in learning coping skills and social emotional learning. Responsive classroom is based on the CASEL framework. Responsive classroom really is about creating student-centered, social, and safe classroom spaces. Part of that responsive classroom also leads to our morning meetings. So in our elementary schools, that morning meeting that teachers are having with their students, that connection, that let's connect first thing, let's connect as a community, building those safe spaces where all students can belong. We also have habits of mind. There are 16 habits of mind that are infused without activities and work that is done at the elementary level. Restorative practices, you've heard us talk a good bit about that. I think sometimes we think of restorative practices about the restoration and repair part of it, but really the basis of restorative practices is relationships. It's about relationships, respect, responsibility, and repair and restorative work when necessary. Restorative practices is K to 12. We also use the second step curriculum, which helps students to build those social emotional skills. It's facilitated by our school counselors. School families, where each staff member in our elementary schools has a small group of students who become part of their families and stay with them throughout the years, building again another place where hopefully students can find connection and belonging. Last year, we started a pilot partnership with CHOP's Office of Integrated Health. This program was called Be Well. We did a pilot at Marion Elementary in third grade. This year, we're providing it to all third graders across the district. It's a 6-week program. CHOP comes in and provides the lessons. It's 6 weeks. Each lesson is 40 minutes, and it focuses on different areas intended to teach children healthy activities so that for wellness and personal wellness and things hopefully that they can take forward with them. Class 1 focuses on healthy coping skills and talks about resiliency and coping. Class 2 talks about physical activities, sleep hygiene, and breath work. Class 3 talks about mindfulness and the benefit of pause and reflect. Class 4 talks about healing hands. Class 5 is healthy eating and nutrition. We know that's also an important part of wellness. And Class 6 focuses on mindful movement through yoga. Our intention is to continue to partner with CHOP. This is a service that they provide free of charge to the district, and we've gotten great reviews. So we're excited to be able to continue to offer it. And under Mr. Marta's leadership, we also are being mindful about how we can expand this to other grade levels as we're moving forward. You also see reference to groups facilitated by school counselors. So again, as we start to move up in those tiers, our school counselors know their students really well. And sometimes we'll see that there is a common theme or something that several students are going through that they might benefit from coming together as a group and talking through that under the guidance of a school counselor. Maybe it's a group for students who are new to the district and are having trouble connecting. That's a way for new students to come together and meet others and hopefully make those connections. Could be students who are struggling socially and need that social connection. So maybe they do like a lunch bunch or a social group. Could also be if students are dealing with grief and perhaps they have a recent loss that they're processing through, being able to come together as groups. They're short-term groups based on the needs of the students and then are selected by school counselors or teacher recommendations. We also have peer mentors who are trained and support their peers across our different schools. You heard me reference our achievement teams. Our achievement teams are a really important part of the work that we do. Our achievement teams are student services team members, representatives of our building administration, and members of our curriculum and instruction team. The teams come together and talk specifically about any concerns they might be seeing with students. This is a place where the teams can plan what interventions we might want to put into place. There's a monitoring of the response to those interventions and being able to come back and say, is it working? Is it not working? What do we need to do next? It's a really deliberate eye on students at the individual level who might need additional supports and services. We also have at all three of our levels the time built in the day where we can support students with what they need. When at the K-4 level, in I&E, which is intervention and enrichment at the middle level, and lunch and learn. This is really time where students can get additional supports, again, from enrichment to intervention. Maybe a student was absent and just needs to connect with a teacher. Or maybe a student just needs to connect with a teacher and build that relationship or have some time with staff members that they trust. So this is really a flexible time where students can get what they need. Our START referrals, our START is part of our student assistance program. It's a confidential referral and can address all sorts of different issues. The team looks at what the concerns are, works with the family, talks about what supports might be in place. Could be family concerns, substance abuse, eating disorders, anxiety, stress, depression, any of the variety of things that students might be facing. Another example of our student supports at the high school level is the advisory. That advisory period, they have set lessons that they provide to students with their advisor in those lessons that focuses periodically on wellness-related topics. And again, this is good while I'm highlighting the high school. This again is not meant to be all-inclusive. Our high schools under Dr. Johnson's leadership started the wellness days at Harriton, and that's expanded. And it's been such a valuable resource and another example of how it isn't just the work that's happening within the student services department. We have a lot of people on our team that are committed to this work and are really doing great things to support students and families. And with that, again, is the importance of making sure that our staff that are in front of students feel equipped to be able to support. The state does require us to do a minimum of 4 hours of training every 5 years for grades 6 to 12 for suicide awareness and prevention. We exceed that. We believe it's important for all of our staff, K to 12, to have this training and awareness. We know, unfortunately, that suicide awareness and prevention impacts our youngest learners too, and so we need to be mindful of that. So we provide that training, and we focus also on trauma-informed practices and have provided all staff training on trauma-informed care. And what we started doing a couple years ago, we created a supporting student and staff wellness guide that we update annually. And I just put some of the topics that we include in that. It's really like a one-stop resource for our staff that highlights key points of training that we've provided and gives them a place to go. So if you can see, we base it all on our wellness policy, and that importance as that is our building block. But when do you seek additional support? What do you look for with suicidal ideation? What do you do if you see that? What are indicators of school violence, and how do you respond? We highlight the high view of trauma-informed care. Included with that trauma-informed care, we've also provided training on racial trauma and responding to microaggressions and bias, and the resources are available to them through this guide that we provide. Also within that, we have recorded our professional learning sessions, and so it's a quick place where staff can go if they decide they want to see Dr. Naray and I present on trauma-informed practices again, they can go and review the training that was provided as a refresher. And then we presented pretty comprehensively before, and just wanted to highlight again this evening, you know, despite our best efforts, we can put all of the great programs in place and have all of the right people in the right places, and crisis will still happen. Crisis can be small, it can be large, and everything in between. And over-responding and under-responding are equally harmful. So what we want to make sure we do is have our teams prepared so that they can face that crisis situation and make decisions and be able to help support staff and students in those moments. Prepare is the foundation of that. It is a school crisis prevention and intervention curriculum developed by the National Association of School Psychologists. What is unique about Prepare is it's the only school crisis prevention and intervention curriculum that was developed by educators for educators. And the district has committed to having Prepare trainers on staff. At any given time, we've had 2 of our student services team members who are able to do the training. That has allowed us first to have experts on our team to help support with our action steps that we take, but also to be able to provide that turnaround training to our relevant team members. This is, again, really a way to provide school-based mental health professionals and other educational professionals with that crisis preparedness. And by doing that, we really tie that in. That's enhancing our school safety. That's supporting with crisis management and response. We have crisis response teams trained in every one of our schools. When we talk about our crisis response teams, those are our student services team members that I highlighted this evening. And we also provide more extensive training for our building administrators as well, who often are on the front line and supporting during those crisis situations. We also, starting in the summer of 2022, pulled together under Dr. Naray and Mr. Marta's leadership a district-level crisis response team, recognizing that sometimes when a crisis occurs, a particular school or department might need additional support, and having a crisis-level response team allows us to be able to easily get support actualized in moments that it's required. We do provide some additional training to that crisis response team. Dr. Naray and Mr. Marta work with them closely and provide additional training, do scenario-based training, so it's practicing in the event that other crisis situations occur. All of the team members that serve on crisis response have specialized training, again, in Prepare, in risk assessments. Our suicide risk assessment process and procedures are based on the work of Dr. Terry Erbacher, and our comprehensive school threat assessment guidelines, which we've presented on previously. Okay, yeah, great. Oh, yeah, good.
So last spring, under Ms. Schaefer's leadership, there was a panel discussion about how to keep kids safe and how to make sure that we're promoting true wellness. So we've started a new series called Keep Kids Safe. it's going to be a series of informational videos that are a joint venture between the district and the township. And so every month there'll be a short video and then resources for parents, guardians, caregivers, et cetera, to access. The first video that is up online includes Ms. Frazier, and she's talking about the CSTAG, the threat assessment guidelines that we use in the district. And so this month, or I guess in September, there was district personnel, and then next month, or I should say this month, there will be township personnel, and it will culminate in a repository of information and resources that will be available for our community. And with that, we'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yanni and Ms. Frazier, for that presentation. Open up to the board if there are any questions. Anyone?
I'll go if no one else wants to do that. Thank you for the presentation. I know we discussed this at the CCOB meeting, but I thought it was really important to talk again about how we handle discussions about nutrition and healthy eating and how that pertains not only to keeping our students healthy, but also can have the opposite effect of encouraging eating disorders and disordered thinking and body dysmorphia in our students. I know my child was weighed in, and I learned at our last meeting that that's a state requirement, which I found pretty upsetting, that all of our kids had to be weighed in school. I, in fact, after that meeting, had a community member contact me about that being a really upsetting experience for her kid and her kid's friends. And so if we could talk about some of the conversations we have around that. I mean, I know even my fourth grader was having the Be Well lesson, and she came home today and told me the maximum amount of grams of sugar she was supposed to have. And while I understand that can happen in a context of a nutrition lesson, that is like, I hear that and I think, oh, that's the first step on the road towards really obsessive calorie counting and disordered eating. And that really scared me. So if we could have some sort of discussion about how we're handling that going forward.
So I'll start, and then I'm sure Ms. Frazier is going to jump in. First of all, I think when we talk about sensitive issues, BMI and weigh-ins and all of those types of things, we have to make sure that our staff is doing that with discretion, and I think they are. I think there's some preemptive things that we can do, and we have to create this entire ecosystem around wellness so that kids can understand when they're told about grams of sugar or carbohydrates, or they should be doing this, that they can contextualize it so that it's not just a one-off bit of information. I have to tell you, growing up, I was not the leanest child on the playground, and I know the sensitivity that it takes so that we don't create in kids body dysmorphia, eating disorders, students having negative thoughts about themselves. So we have to create this ecosystem, and along with that ecosystem, we have to make sure that there are plenty of opportunities for physical movement.
And I would, in the importance of balance, right, there is also the piece of needing to provide information so that students can learn to make healthy choices. As part of the work of the Wellness Committee, as we're moving forward, one of the subcommittees of the Wellness Committee is nutrition and physical fitness. So we definitely will share back the feedback with that committee too.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to report out as we get towards the end of the year, the work that the different subcommittees of the Wellness Committee do this year.
I appreciate that, and I really would appreciate, I know we've spoken about advocacy since it is a state requirement, advocating as a district to have that outdated practice of weighing our students unnecessarily eliminated from the required practice. And I have gotten community feedback that would be appreciated. And I know from a personal standpoint, if I had to be weighed in to participate in our district, that would not be an experience that I would abide. So I think that I would appreciate my colleagues' support in continuing advocacy against that practice.
Okay, so it feels like I'm having a little trouble with this presentation because, and I can understand why, because wellness is all encompassing. So having said that, it's hard for me to wrap around this presentation because I don't see the structure and process. So I feel like a lot of this is like the prepare, the crisis, like the back end, it's really clear. This is what we do when something happens, A, B, C, D. And a lot of these pieces are geared towards elementary school kids. So understanding that we're really trying to establish a culture of belonging that includes wellness, and there's so many factors of this. Our job as a board is to look at the structure and process that you put into place and then look for the measurable ways we can say, are we achieving this, are we not? So I guess having said that, I would love to see the next iteration of this, which really says, like, chart whatever, like, these are all the things we're looking at. And we understand that it is a system-wide impact. And I'm so glad you shared that about, like, we need to make sure the bus drivers are doing that because it's the relationships that kids have with adults. But the secret of happiness in life has been studied, the relationships to each other as well. So building those strong lifelong relationships from K on are so important. But we have to look at the whole system. And we know what's going on with high school kids now. We know that they're under high stress. We know our schools, particularly ours, put a pressure on AP that is above other high school students. And we're looking at the PA state data around the thoughts and ideas that they have around suicide. So I'd like to pull that in there because it's hard to say yay or nay. Of course, everything sounds good, but I need to grab a hold of it a little harder and shift.
So in the coming weeks, we're going to be doing a belonging survey, and we're going to use a nationally normed instrument to do that. We're also going to be doing the PACE survey, and that captures some of the supportive and protective factors that we'll be reporting on. We're also going to be looking at things like office referrals, guidance referrals, all of those types of things. One of the best parts of my job is that I don't have to be in my office to do my job. So as I'm out in schools and we're talking about advisory, evaluating what's going on in advisory, and then reporting back on the impact. Is the impact that we're seeing worthy of the time that we're putting in? Are we seeing year over year spikes in our data with referrals to counselors or to wellness counselors or additional testing so that we can use that data in real time to be nimble to adjust the system, right? So one of my superintendent goals this year is to come back to the board in actually just a few weeks and give the board a written report of some of the systems in our district. So some of that data will be in there, and then we can look from there and we can add to that data. So by the end of the year, we'll have a really clear idea of the impact of all of the things that we're doing.
Thank you.
Ms. Garrison?
My question, I want to go back to what Shayna brought up. Why is it a state requirement, and can the child decide they don't want to do it? They have the right to say they don't want to do it, correct?
Right, so school code, actually, there was an omnibus bill maybe a decade or so ago that introduced BMI. So we are required as part of our reporting. We don't report students' weight, but I have to sign off on an accuracy statement saying that we did in fact weigh kids. There's been advocacy for several years now. That's an antiquated process. Years ago, there were letters that went home that created all kinds of discontent and malcontent across the entire state. So that's one of the things, as we look at all of the things that schools are required to do, we have to be really clear about where we want to put our advocacy to say, look, these are antiquated practices. But until the state shifts that, we have to do it. Now, if a student refuses to be weighed, we're not going to argue with the student or make the student get weighed. But in general, that is a practice that we do have to comply with.
Right. I mean, the same thing as if you were going to your doctor's appointment. They're capturing that data, or if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. So the child is not going to have any kind of negative consequences if they said, I don't want to do it. Okay, thank you.
Understandably so, but like, I know I get nervous if I go to my doctor's office and tell them I don't want to be weighed. That's a big self-advocacy burden we're placing on students. Not to say that they couldn't, or they wouldn't, or they shouldn't.
Right, but all students don't feel that way. It's not a universal thing. So I'm saying we have the systems in place for those who want to do it. Those who do not want to do it don't have to do it. That's why I asked that question.
I understand that, but I'm saying that even if you don't want to do it, it can still be damaging to a child.
I was hoping that you could expand a bit on the training and support that we have for staff, specifically around some of the pieces about the trauma-informed care, racial trauma and responding to microaggressions and bias and resources. And not only the training, but specifically pulling up how administrators hold teachers and support staff accountable, how our administrators held accountable, because a lot of times we are not seeing reports from community members or comments that this training is being put into practice with efficacy in a way that supports our students' experience in alignment with our goals.
Yeah, I think that you're hitting on the key of it can't be just a one and done. So we've provided over the years, we'll do like a more in-depth training and then do smaller refresher trainings, provide information to our principals to help do during faculty meetings. So I think it's also thinking about professional learning isn't just what occurs on the days your children are home with you and staff are in training. There's a lot of different ways that professional learning occurs, which is through our PLCs, through our faculty meetings. And so it's thinking about ways that we can reach to all of our team members in those different forums. Again, we've provided more in-depth training. It was about 2 years ago that we did more in-depth on to trauma-informed, specifically going in deep with racial trauma and how to address that and support that. And then we've done some smaller trainings since that time. Again, using that, we're always competing for time. There's a lot of things that we want to cover. We've talked about that here with professional learning. So the resource guide that we created for staff was another way of saying we want to put at your fingers places you can go where you can refresh yourself on some of those strategies, some of that knowledge. To accountability, that's also a place where administrators can go and use as a support for staff when they're working with staff on a day-to-day. And that can be very situational when you're engaging with a student or in a particular situation, and staff can lean on that, administrators can lean on that.
Thanks so much. Similarly to what Curry mentioned, and Dr. Yanni, you said you'd be using the data. I think it would be really helpful for us to see the data as it relates to which of our schools are being, which of our schools need additional support, which of our staff members, not to share necessarily publicly names of staff members, but to ensure that the student experience really lives into what we are aspiring and saying we're doing. Because according to students' experience, that doesn't seem to always be the case.
Sure. I absolutely hear that. I think along the lines of accountability, the state evaluation system for professional staff is now encompassing cultural proficiency and racial bias and microaggression training. So you're going to see a stronger emphasis on that. I think it's really, we're working on coding behavioral infractions in a better way, so we'll be able to pull that data a little bit more. And then I think we also have to be, I'm not negating your point, we're always going to have some incidents that occur, but when incidents occur, we have to be transparent about it and work to fix it, right? That's where the restorative practices come in, right? Because, many times in our world, we see microaggressions and bias modeled, right? And so we have to be forthright enough to say, we had an incident, here's what we're going to do as a refresher for staff, as what we're going to do for students, and make sure there's that restorative piece. Because without that restorative piece, you just create that bigger divide. So I think having these pieces actually wrapped into the evaluation system makes a big difference, because for the first time, it really adds accountability where maybe there wasn't that same level of accountability before.
Any other? Ms. Schaffmeister?
Still kind of formulating this question, but leaning on to what you're talking about, the data and that, and I'm thinking about the MTS system and you're talking often about the achievement teams and how that works. And I appreciate what you said about you can intervention yourself out of a foundation that is not built strong enough to give each children what they need and the belonging. So what I'm wondering is, how are we collecting that type of data? Is this through the Illuminate program? Is this achievement team using all this and putting it through Illuminate, and we will see some reports and how this is working and ensuring the foundation is the strength we need?
So you're kind of stealing my thunder a little bit, because we're looking at some other data structures, because I think we need to revitalize our data culture so that we have the ability to pull data in better ways. So we're actually talking about that administratively right now. Really this year, what we're really focusing on is evaluating that tier one. What is the efficacy of our tier one? Let's get some baseline data, office referrals, counselor referrals, suspensions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then let's look building by building and make some goals. And then as we move through year over year, let's track our progress towards reducing reducing behaviors and reducing negative consequences by making sure that we have better restorative measures in place. One of the things the district committed to doing this year is making sure that every staff member is trained in restorative practices. So throughout this year, every staff member is going to be trained, and that alone is going to move the needle. But it's not just that; it's making sure that we're actually implementing restorative practices with fidelity.
Sorry if I hook onto that for a second, and I can't believe I just said that. Everybody has a view of what restorative practices means in their head. Is there like a one pager that can go out to families? Because again, building a culture is like, this is actually what it is. Because it does lend itself to believe that it only happens after the fact. So restore, but.
One of the things I feel really strongly about is I have my greatest ideas when I'm driving to and from work, and I think this is a great idea. I don't know if anyone else will. That was a joke, should have all laughed. But one of the things that we need to do is create something called like making our practices public. And so when we have restorative practices in place, here's exactly what it is. Plain language, no word salad, no edu jargon, just here's what it is, here's what it looks like in action, and here's the intended consequences. And then throughout the year, we can say, the intended consequences are the actual, like we're actually getting out of it what we believe we should be getting out of it, or we need to go back and do some more training or development or learning with our staff. Because if we're truly implementing it, you're right, it's not just after the fact. There's a whole philosophy that needs to be operationalized so that even those after effects are greatly reduced.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to the board for your questions. We do not have any additional agenda items this evening, so we will move on to audience recognition. At this time, the chat feature will be open, and you'll see a 10-minute timer on your screen at home. You can submit your comments and/or questions via the chat feature. Please be sure to begin with your full name and where you reside within the district in order for your comment to be shared. That is the same for in-person comment. Please make sure that you start with your name and where you reside in the district. And again, it does not need to be specific, but neighborhood will suffice. And Mr. Orlando, do we have any in-person comments for tonight's meeting? And can we start the timer on the screen? Oh, it did. Okay, thank you.
Yes, we do. We have four individuals. The first is Marta Villarega, Lisa Prescott, Ruth Jenkins, and then Sarah Thomas.
Can I close this computer without creating major damage? No? Didn't speak fast enough. All right. Good evening. My name is Marta Villarega from Ardmore. November is National Epilepsy Awareness Month. It is estimated that about 1.2% of U.S. people have active epilepsy. This comes to about 3.4 million people nationwide. Additionally, about 1 in 26 people will develop epilepsy at some point during their lifetime. In 2021, Act 84 was signed into law in Pennsylvania. This became effective for the 22-23 school year. Act 84 enables professional employees of a school to be trained in seizure recognition and response through an online course or in-person training approved by the Department of Health. Under Act 84, the approved course must be provided at no cost and count toward a professional educator's continuing professional education requirement. A right-to-know request in July of 2023 for a list of Lmsd staff who have received this training revealed that no staff took this training course in 2023. Given that there are children with epilepsy in our district, I found it very discouraging that no staff has taken this free training. Being educated on seizure recognition and related first aid would give staff the tools on how to support students with epilepsy. In case you don't know, an epileptic seizure can come in many forms. It can be a period of blank staring, or it can be as intensive as a tonic-clonic seizure with loss of consciousness, body stiffening, and shaking. A tonic-clonic seizure that lasts longer than 5 minutes needs immediate medical help, and if it is not addressed in a timely manner, can lead to brain damage or could even be deadly. Many, if not all, students with epilepsy have either an IEP or a 504 plan, which requires some level of nursing support during epileptic emergencies, and so they can participate in extracurricular activities, just like their non-disabled peers. Being trained on how to support these students' medical needs would help staff support students with epilepsy so they can participate safely in extracurricular activities like their non-disabled peers. If the district encouraged or required staff to take this free training, they would understand why key language in Policy 101 on equity and Policy 114 on individualized student supports and services is applicable to children with epilepsy. I read now a section to you from Policy 114. School districts are required to provide related aids, services, or accommodations needed to ensure that each otherwise qualified student with a handicap who has a physical, mental, or health impairment is afforded an equal opportunity to participate in and obtain benefits from the school program and extracurricular activities to the maximum extent appropriate to that student's ability. To summarize, being trained on seizure recognition and related first aid would educate staff in this district on what the needs of students with epilepsy are, so that hopefully staff can understand why these students' needs have to be met so they can equally participate safely in extracurricular activities like their non-disabled peers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Villagra.
Good evening, Lisa Prosnitz, Penn Valley. Sorry, my thoughts are not very well collected tonight. It's been a long day, but I wanted to thank you all for being here. And thank you for addressing wellness for our students. I was hoping, there's a big piece of wellness that I think was missing here, and I was hoping that the presentation would address the significant need of mental health and the culture shift that's needed in our community as it's related to our student wellness. Our students are experiencing unhealthy types of stress in the classes they're taking, the homework assignments that they have. And sleep, as I've been, up here talking about for years now, is a huge piece of it, right? Like sleep is kind of the net, the safety net, or maybe that's not even the best analogy. It's sort of what is going to enable everything else to function, right? It's going to enable our kids to be more alert during the day and to be able to get more things done in a healthy way, to not get into car accidents, to make better decisions during the course of a day. But that being said, they are experiencing, sorry, I'm trying to talk off the cuff and I'm just not really good at this. But as we've seen from the Challenge Success Survey, from the PAYS data, they are still experiencing suicidal ideation. They are still cutting themselves and self-harming behaviors. We have students with eating disorders. And I know that our school district is not solely responsible for this. We are a community, we are a community of parents, but I think we really need to work together. And the school district's kind of the unifying force for all of us. You're what brings us all together. And to not really mention any of the things that we could even just do immediately, like no homework deadlines past 10 p.m., giving more homework on paper instead of on the computer screen, changing the time of midterms so that they're not first thing in the morning, increasing discussions about life balance, revamping advisory, as Dr. Yanni mentioned, looking at. I just, students in our district think that getting a B, not all students, but we have enough students right now that think that getting B is a failure. And I just feel like a lot of what we spoke about was what to do when we're in crisis, and there was no discussion about why our kids are in crisis. And I would like to see us come together as a community to help support them, look at our practices and how we really can change some of this culture that is producing unhealthy types of stress. I don't want to eliminate all stress. I think it's beneficial for our kids to experience some because life is not always easy. But there are unhealthy levels of stress that we're seeing in our kids. And I just think that it's something that needs to be included in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prosnitz.
The lower X is here, as usual. My name is Ruth Jenkin, and I'm from Wynwood. I just want to comment on Shayna's comment of weighing the students. When you weigh somebody, you're making a judgment, and you're judging them, and they're going to judge themselves. And I, too, was not the slimmest person on the playground. And the great joy of a high school reunion is coming back and seeing what happened to those cheerleaders. So I think, really think about taking the weighing out of the, even giving them a chance to opt out is giving them a chance to think about it. The other thing I would like to just comment is on mental health, is that I am very pleased, Dr. Yanni, that the building is now secure. As I walk around and I see that there are people who are preventing students from leaving and entering without some kind of identification. And I think that gives our students and staff and parents and neighbors a secure feeling, knowing that everybody is safe. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the time change thinking and the mental health of our youngest students who have to leave the house at 9 o'clock in the morning, get to school at 9 o'clock, who have been up since 6 o'clock in the morning, whose parents need to leave for work and have to find some way to handle their work situation. These are students who are coming home at 4:30 in the afternoon, when ordinarily if they would come home by 3, they would probably take a nap because they're tired. So I think that once again, you're able to leave the older children home and they can get themselves off to school, where the younger children need to be put onto the bus by their parents, and then their parents can go to work. And I think the high school students can get themselves off to school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkin.
Sarah Thomas, Wynwood. I have a few questions tonight regarding full-day kindergarten. Some are from me, some are from community members that have reached out. I know that we now have the 10-day enrollment numbers, so just wanted wonder if there was an update on the MCPC enrollment projections, when they are expected to complete that, when it will be shared with the community. Lots of community members are anxiously awaiting those projections to see how that would impact kindergarten. Also wondering about the full-day kindergarten committee and when that work will start up again for this school year, and what the next steps are for that committee moving forward. And then finally, there are some community members that recently reached out asking for more information about full-day kindergarten and whether it's definitely going to happen for fall of '24. And the response that they received was that a decision regarding the implementation has not yet been made, and that the current goal for a date for a decision is March of 2024, which has a lot of parents highly stressed and anxious, as deposits for private kindergarten programs in the area are typically expected in December and January. And so lots of parents are wondering if their decision is not made until March, kind of this balancing act of what do I do? Kindergarten registration for the district typically opens in January or February, which is also before this March goal. So just kind of wondering if it's possible to bump up that goal at all, to give our community a better sense of what to expect for fall of '24. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Promise. Ms. Buckman, can you please read any comments that came in via the chat?
Yes, we have just one comment in the chat. It's from Michelle McGill of Ballackinwood. She says, "That was a great presentation. I'm very impressed to hear LMSD speaking about metrics and outcomes. We need to make sure all of the programs we are implementing actually work. Also, recorded data should be shared with the community as it will build trust. This presentation had a much softer tone. I look forward to data being shared at future board meetings." And that's the conclusion of the comments.
Thank you. I wanted to just take a moment and talk about legislative advocacy. This past year, we took a first step in revamping the legislative committee of the board, something that had taken place prior to COVID and sort of was one of those things that fell off during COVID. We did a little bit of work around sort of opportunities for parents and the community to do some advocacy, and just the conversation around the BMI and needing to weigh students, and that being based on state law, just led me to want to give a quick update or sort of plug for any upcoming legislating meetings that we'll be having throughout the school year of the board, and how they'll have opportunities for parents to learn how to do, reach out to their legislators, their state legislators around topics such as this. So,
I'm sorry, there are more comments. I didn't scroll far enough, my bad. There's one, but that person doesn't say where they live in the district, so we'll move on. Jill Altschuler of Marion Station. I want to thank Lisa Prosnitz for pointing out those very important points. Ms. Fraser and Dr. Yanni, how do you know if students do or do not have a trusted adult? And if you do know that certain students do not have a trusted adult, what do you do to try to make sure they do have one? In terms of the importance of partnerships with families, how do you go about developing those partnerships with intentionality, not necessarily with individuals on a committee, but on a larger scale, so that all parents and guardians feel a strong sense of partnership from the school district? Are restorative practices taking place at the high school level in terms of the proactive community building aspect? If so, could you please give an example, adding specific examples to many parts of this presentation, such as a solid foundation and examples of student supports would make it more impactful. And again, my apologies for missing that comment.
I have a couple responses to the comment. So there was a comment about epilepsy training. That is offered through our package with Office of Safe Schools, and I think that as we re-engage with that this year, we can absolutely talk with our nurses and our clinical providers to make sure that we have a significant number of our staff members trained. Around the culture shift that needs to happen in our community. One of the reasons that, or let me say this, after we do the belonging survey and we do the pay survey and we get all that data back, we're going to be talking about how to branch outside of our district and leverage some community-based supports to augment what we're doing in school. There are any number of community agencies out there that can provide any number of student supports that can supplement what we're providing for students in school. A lot of times, folks don't know about those supports. So it's really going to be incumbent upon us to make sure that we make those connections with families. So the conversation about mental health and the conversation around the data around belonging and how students are doing in terms of social emotional learning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is going to continue. The reason that we're going to put metrics around it is so that we can make some judgments and determinations about what we might need to change in our programming. I will let Mr. Johnson know that he got a shout out. I was thanked for making sure that the building was more secure, but we'll make sure, I'm sorry, Dr. Johnson knows that. Full day kindergarten. So the MCPC will be giving us their results in a few weeks. They'll be doing a presentation at the November board meeting. And I anticipate that we'll be able to make some decisions well in advance of that March timeframe because we are sensitive to the fact that there are, deposits that might need to be given in the December or January timeframe. I think along with those decisions around full day kindergarten will be the significant impact to what positions get rerouted so that we can fund kindergarten. So what are all those impacts? Because we know that we're not going to be able to fund full day kindergarten purely through all new money in our budget. So there's going to be trade-offs. So we'll be talking about those in much more detail in the coming weeks as well. Once we have that information back from MCPC, we'd like to then meet with the full day kindergarten committee so that we can, reestablish talks and use that as a think tank about, how do we move initiatives forward. There'll be more information about metrics and outcomes, as I mentioned before. And, the question about how do we know if every student has a trusted adult? One of the things, that's a self-reported thing. We can't go to every single student and say, do you have a trusted adult? But what we can do is create those conditions so that we can create opportunities for kids to feel connected to their teachers, to their counselors, to someone that they feel a kinship to in school. We talked about making sure that the community understands what restorative practices is, how the philosophy is being implemented with fidelity in the district, not just on the back end. So there will be much more information in the coming weeks and months as we put everyone through that training. And then I talked about during the presentation, this idea of making our practices public. So making sure that our community understands what it is that we're doing with kids in school, being almost overly transparent so that folks know exactly what we're doing.
Thank you, Dr. Yanni. So that is the end of the overall portion of our agenda for the evening. We have upcoming meetings, generally in person here in the District Administration Office Boardroom. Thursday, October 12th is the Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting at 8:30 a.m. Next Monday, October 16th, is our regular business board meeting. That'll be at 8 p.m. here. And then also on Wednesday, October 25th, is the Equity and Anti-Racism Committee at 7 p.m., and that is a Zoom-only meeting. Other upcoming events in the district, this Wednesday at 9:30 is the Ask the Superintendent. It'll be here in this boardroom. On Tuesday, October 17th is the next ISC Hot Topic on school safety and crisis management. Sunday, October 22nd is the inaugural 5K race and fun run to support the Sean Hughes Memorial Fund. And then on Tuesday, October 24th is the Committee for Special Education's tools that you can use Zoom at 7 p.m. So I hope you all have a good evening. Hopefully the Phillies will pull it out.